Hey folks, how's it going? I'm in the classroom today. So I went ahead and took a look at your drafts and I provided feedback to you on your drafts. And I also looked at those questions that you had answered in the writing journal and I noticed patterns, right? Lots of folks were asking similar questions. So I've gone ahead and made this little video because I want to provide responses to those questions that it seems like lots of folks have. So here we go. First, lots of people were asking questions about research. What constitutes research for this assignment? And the easiest way for me to answer this is to say that everybody should have, on one hand, outside research. So you want some information coming from credible resources. On the other hand, you also want some of that personal experience, observation, pop culture reference, etc. You want both of these. And you want both of these because the outside research helps you establish credibility. That is, that many of you are writing on topics that you know about, although you may not be an expert in. And so the outside research helps buttress the arguments that you're making. At the same time, the personal experience, the observation, the pop culture reference, etc., that helps you rhetorically. In other words, those are the sorts of examples that can resonate with the audience. So you combine these in order to build an argument that's both logically strong as well as rhetorically effective. Quick example. Last week I gave you the op-ed about sex education in America. And if we look at this op-ed here, I've actually recolor-coded it. And so in this case, you can see how the student has a claim up front that the system is broken. And then the student in this yellow here gives us a personal example about what happened in her Catholic high school. And then after that, the student goes ahead and gives us outside research that supports the idea that there are problems with sex ed. And so the idea here is that there's that 1-2 punch. That is that we have the personal examples resonating with the audience, and we also have the outside research increasing the credibility of the writer here. And so that's a way of thinking about how you're bringing in the outside research and your own examples. And now quickly, I know one student pointed out that at one point in the documents that I've provided, I'd said that it was possible to get away without doing any outside research. And at another point, I required you to do both. And I will say this, it is much better to have some outside research than none at all. I'm very careful about saying definitively you must do this. But I have found that the most effective op-eds that students have written for this assignment invariably include both. So I hope that that clarifies that. Now, other folks have been interested in kind of the structure and the organization. Like, hey, Berman, I've never written an op-ed before, so I have these ideas in mind, but I'm having real trouble kind of organizing this. And so people ask, like, how many paragraphs? And so let me try to address that. I imagine that for a lot of us, you're working in the conventions of an essay. And so here I've mapped out kind of the body paragraphs of an essay. And so the understanding is that we have a claim, and then there's the support, and then there's the reasoning or the explanation for the support. And so you have a body paragraph that does that, you have another body paragraph that does that, and you have another body paragraph that does that. Now, yes, I do like this as a check, right, on the logical strength of your piece. But what you want to be careful with is thinking that you're just writing 3 paragraphs. And again, let me return to the example that I was just sharing. If we look here, if you look at what is actually happening in this section of the text, the student is giving us a claim. The student is giving us multiple pieces of support, both anecdotal as well as outside research, and the student is explaining the support. And so what's happening is that this student has actually developed 4 paragraphs, even though it's really, according to this model here, a single paragraph. And so the answer now is that I can't answer with regard to you must include this many paragraphs. And that's because often the amount of paragraphs becomes a stylistic choice. And so you want to make sure that you have a logic or reasoning packet, right? That you have your claims and you have your support. But how you eventually decide to lay that out for the audience is a rhetorical choice. I will say that often in op-eds, the paragraphs are short, because shorter paragraphs, it is easier to digest shorter paragraphs. And so sometimes there's space because of readability. And so take that into consideration. One of our classmates, let me see if I can find it here. Sorry, I have a lot of these pulled up. One of our classmates does this well. You note that in her piece, she has a whole paragraph and it says, so what is glyphosate? And so that's the whole paragraph right there. Well, that's a rhetorical choice, right? She wants to emphasize the question. And so I can't answer with regard to paragraphs, but what I can say is that if you have a paper that has about 4 claims in it, then you know that you have to have enough support and reasoning for each of the 4 claims that you've developed. Hope that helps. Here we go. Questions about tone and style. One student in particular asked if they could use this casual language. My answer, absolutely. Tone, style, language use, etc., all of those are rhetorical choices. And so you're really thinking about audience. And so if you have a little bit of humor in there, well, that's probably going to work in your favor, unless the subject is really serious and you may want to watch out. But the idea is that you could use humor because it can help draw in the audience. Similarly, you can get away with casual language. Now, I will say this. You have to balance the use of casual language with your credibility. So it's one thing if you're using casual language all the way through and it comes across as one friend speaking to another. It's another thing if there's an informal tone and some casual language, but you're also bringing in strong outside research at times. Note the difference between those two. So I have no problem with the tone, the style, the casual language, as long as you're still building a logically strong case. Hope that that nuance makes sense. Similar to that, I had a student ask about credibility. How do I establish credibility? And one thing there is that I imagine that whatever it is you're writing about, you have some experience with. And so rule of thumb is to be sure to get your experience up front, because essentially what you're doing is then establishing your credibility up front. I'll give you an example. One of our classmates is writing a paper, let me find it, sorry, on gun violence. And as I begin reading the paper, the student talks about these kind of national issues with gun violence. But when I arrive at paragraph 3, the student begins talking about a personal experience that she had. And so in my mind, if I'm thinking about establishing credibility, I would recommend that this student put this example up front because it helps her actually become more credible with the topic. Not meaning that she can get away with not having any outside research, but because it establishes that she has experience with it. The final point that I want to make about credibility is that credibility is also more than just the experience you have given a certain subject. You're actually creating credibility as you're putting your piece together. So all of those other issues, the tone, the style, the use of outside research, writing well, all of those, are credibility moves. So consider that as you put your piece together. And then some nuts and bolts questions. Folks asked about a works cited page, MLA. It's really funny. I don't give any instructions about what you necessarily need to hand in, and then the papers are MLA formatted beautifully. Right? It's like the conditioning is strong. So this assignment is not an essay, or an academic essay. You're actually writing in a specific genre, in the genre of the op-ed. So I am not asking for any MLA. You do not need to use parenthetical statements. You do not need a works cited page that's been formatted according to MLA standards. Not at all. The only things that I am asking for is that at the end of your document, you do provide me the URLs to the resources that you used. So if I have any questions, I know where I can go. And then the other part of this is that I'm giving you a little bit of freedom with regard to how you want to format it. In other words, I said that you could potentially use a picture or something. And so if you take a look at what a couple of your classmates have done, you can see here that this is what I'd like your final document to have. But what you can also see is that this classmate went ahead and embedded that image. And so in a sense, this actually has the feel of an op-ed, right? Another one of your classmates embedded an image into it. right? And so it also has the feel. Here's another one, right? Actually, this one's cool. Set up columns. And so you get a sense of the op-ed genre here, right? And so it does not have to come to me. It certainly doesn't have to come in MLA format, but you can actually frame it in a way that you would want to frame it. So I hope that that clarifies. Now, last point. Some of the questions were a little ambiguous, and I get it. I'm not sure if this thing's working overall. Here's a little thing that you can consider. One thing I always ask students to do when they see me face to face in office hours is to take out their paper and to reverse engineer it for me. And that is to reduce the 1,000 words that you've produced into 4 sentences. Can you pinpoint those claims? Right? Essentially, this is an exercise in clear reasoning and logic. And so you should be able to go into your work and just highlight the claims. And if you're having trouble highlighting what you see as your 2 to 4 major claims, then that tells you that you want to put some time into reworking the piece so that the clarity of the argument is made that much clearer. And then the last little thing that you can potentially do is take a step back from your piece and then go back and read it. But attempt to read it not from your own mind, but from the perspective of one of your classmates. So maybe put yourself in the shoes of a classmate that's sitting next to you in bio or something, and then read your piece and think, what would I think if I were that person? Would this resonate with me? And that's really the essential question, because in this case, what you're checking is the rhetorical effectiveness. Do the examples speak to me? Does the tone engage me? And then hopefully that helps you see how you may want to reorganize ideas, what examples you can add, etc. So I hope that this little video sheds some light on some of the issues that are a little confusing. Take care.